Pat Mayo Experience Arnold Palmer Invitational DraftKings picks and preview. I want to let everyone know. Give the episode a like. Goes a long way. And I am giving away 2 Masters Millionaire Maker tickets. All you need to do is go to one of the podcast feeds, the audio podcast feeds, leave a review, preferably 5 stars. Take a screen grab of that and then tweet it to me with your DK handle and the hashtag APIDK. If you don't include the hashtag APIDK, I'm never going to find it, so you're not going to win. So you probably want to win the Millionaire Maker ticket, so do that, all right? Thanks a lot. Do want to let everyone know about fantasynational.com as well. If you subscribe for the monthly plan right now, I recommend the yearly plan, but if you want to test the waters, the monthly plan is available right now and will take you all the way through the Masters, and you'll get a little bit of Heritage sprinkled in there too. So when you win all the money at the Masters, you can double it up at the Heritage the next week. Win-win for everyone. And there will be a Wednesday chat like I do every single week. Well, it won't be every single week because I'm gone next week, and then, you know, the Masters will be back for the live chat. But the live chat tomorrow, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on the DraftKings YouTube page and the DraftKings Facebook page. Myself, Reed Fowler, will be taking your questions live for like an hour and a half, breaking down the field a little bit more now that we have some more information. Now that that's out of the way, let's get to the guest, Mike Leone from DailyRoto.com. What is happening, my man?
Not too much. Thanks for having me on the show. Looking forward to some controversial Tiger talk, I'm sure.
Yeah, okay. That's the number one thing that we have to talk about this week is Tiger Woods. So let's talk about Tiger Woods. I estimate, and this is not based on any sort of projection system, that being the 5th most expensive player on the board, only $10,000, a significant discount off the top-end guys at a course where he's won 8 times, coming off a T2 finish at a course where he'd never played before, that his ownership, and let's talk about this in terms of like the giant $4. I think he's going to be like 35 to 40% owned. What do you think?
Our initial ownership projections by Colin Drew at dailyroto.com have him at 40%. So that's obviously a very, very big number, especially in a field that's this competitive.
So for me, when I see a number like that, you have one of 2 choices of what to do with Tiger Woods. I guess you have 3. I mean, you can really play it any way you want, but do you use every lineup with Tiger Woods in it, or do you use 0 lineups with Tiger Woods in it? And I'll make the bold stance. I'm using 0 Tiger lineups this week. Mainly because I don't like that ownership number. I think that his win equity probably isn't quite what the betting market is telling us it is right now. I get that. I mean, listen, I want Tiger to win an event. If I lose and Tiger wins, you know, that's fine by me. I'm good with that. But at a 40% ownership at a course where he's going to have to hit driver a lot, the one club that has not quite returned for him as of yet, then I don't know. It seems like a very logical fade for me. I could be looking very stupid come Sunday night, but I look stupid most weeks anyway. So what's really the difference? What are you doing with Tiger?
I'm going 0%. I mean, if you're going to lay out the devil's advocate case and say you should play him, I guess you'd say, well, the betting market has him like 80% to T20, which is, you know, if you're trying to create any sort of leverage metric based on his ownership percentage and his odds to T20, if he's 80%, like he's still a good play at 40% owned. And the course history here is great. He's been very good on shots gained approach, which seems to be, if you're going to isolate one of the strokes gained metrics, it's going to be approach shots this week. And I mean, that's the case for it, but I just can't get behind these crazy market odds. And part of it's probably because I wasn't a big golf fan back when Tiger was in his heyday and just crushing fields left and right. But I see one of the more competitive fields that we see for a non-major, and you're putting Tiger at 5-1. I know our odds at Data Golf right now have him as the 10th most likely to win. Even if he's top 5 most likely to win and he's not clear-cut number 1 at 40% owned, I think you have to just take the chance that somebody else wins this tournament. I think it's very unlikely that Tiger's odds to actually win are 10% or greater. They're probably somewhere around 5%. So there's not a whole lot of outcomes where he completely destroys you. And if he has a bad event, someone wins, 40% owned. That's just a massive number. I rarely like to play anybody at that ownership number unless it's a really weak field and you've got, Jason Day in a weak field where we think he's, like I said, like 60% to T20 or something, 30% to T3 or something like that. And I just don't think we're there yet with Tiger. I know he's been great. He's legitimately played well. He hasn't just been lucky. He's played very well. But at the end of the day, it's only been a few events. And for him to earn this ownership percentage, he not only has to be back and good, he has to be Tiger of old.
He has to be Tiger of old, and where this isn't invitational, there's only 120 players in this field, and the top 70 in ties make the cut. So outside of the Masters, this is the tournament we're going to see the highest percentage of players actually end up playing the weekend. So him missing the cut, well, it's definitely on the table. Obviously, anyone can miss a cut at any time. It's far less likely this week, especially at a course where he's had such a great course history, that he's going to end up playing the weekend. Because at 40%, let's say Tiger somehow misses the cut, everyone else is basically in the money then.
Even if he finishes outside of the top 20, you're not in the money, but you're looking really, really strong, considering that you're going to naturally be overweight on a lot of other guys that are really talented golfers at good prices. I mean, this 9K range is loaded. At the data golf finish probabilities at Daily Roto really like Jason Day way up top. And I think just given the competitive field and the pricing that he might go under owned. And you just pick up all of, a little bit of ownership edge on the field on all of these guys, even if you're spread out among 5 or 6 of them. And all you need is Tiger to not top 5, basically. And you're going to be pretty happy. You're going to have some lineups out there that are probably live.
All right, so let's go to the top end of the board. There are 3 players that are quite distinctively ahead of everyone else. Jason Day is one at 11.8, then it's Justin Rose, then it's Rory McIlroy at 10.7. For me, I've been kind of on the Rory train, being like, hey, he's going to be 6% owned every week. I'm going to continue to use Rory. And now even I'm a little shaken by that, especially after I claimed last week that, hey, I'm willing to be a week early on Rory McIlroy, but I want to see Patrick Reed do it first. I mean, I might as well just wear a dunce cap every single week on this show, but for me, Jason Day is so clearly better than everyone else in this field in terms of how he sets up. He's a former winner here, and even historically, when you look back at why Tiger was so good, tee to green, Tiger's one of the best ever, but he always putted well at this course, and good putters do tend to win. I know that can be very static, it can be very variant, and bad putters can putt well. We just saw Paul Casey win, but Jason Day's putter is rolling right now. Tee to green, he's really good, and he has the distance to capitalize on these par 5s. I'm going to be massively overweight on Jason Day of this top end, and I think because of the supreme price and everyone wanted to play Tiger, not a lot of people are going to have him.
I am right there with you with Jason Day. We're starting off the show in agreement. We've got him at about 9% odds to win the tournament, and the next closest person sub 6%. And I was, surprised and thought, maybe there was something wrong with that at first in this competitive field for Day to have such an edge. But we adjust strokes gained basically based on the field strength and the course difficulty. And if you look at the adjustments over the last couple of years relative to the average golfer in this field, we've got Jason Day as the top golfer in strokes gained adjusted over the last 2 years and over the last 6 months. So when you combine that recent form with the long-term skill that he's shown, that's why we start to see him separate himself from the field, even though you would think, sometimes I used to have this tendency too when I first started playing DFS golf that like there's 4 or 5 good guys. I would just always take the cheapest one because I'm like, all these guys are good. All these guys can win. And I try not to differentiate. But I do think that Jason Day differentiates himself. And for the reasons you said, he probably doesn't carry as much ownership as he should. The only drawback today is you can make some pretty cool, fun lineups with like 3 9K guys and not have to dip below 7K for your 6 golfers. So you get some really cool balanced lineups that still have some high-end equity if you don't use Day.
Well, I think you can play it both. It's not a mutually exclusive thing. You can play some Day lineups that end up becoming stars and scrubs lineups, and I think this is actually a week where you can go a bit stars and scrubs because such a higher percentage of the people actually make the cut that your low $7,000 guys just have a better cut percentage made here than they would in a regular week or a week with 156 players in the field. So I think that's one reason to lean Jason Day a little bit. But then if you make, let's say you play 20 lineups and you make 8 Jason Day lineups, that doesn't mean you can't do the triple stack of the $9,000 guys and the other ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably the way I'll do it is I'll make a good chunk of Jason Day lineups and I'll make a good chunk of these, hybrid balanced lineups where those are the lineups I love to build where you're not sacrificing a whole ton of win equity, but you're very balanced 1 through 6. So I really like this range. As far as Rory goes, I'm with you there as well, because I've been saying honestly for like 4 straight tournaments, it's not worth it on Rory. I'm not going to go overweight. Come Wednesday night, I end up going overweight. I just can't help myself. And finally, the more bad rounds he puts out there, the more the data catches up to him, and it's less appealing for him as a leverage play. And it's the price too. The price is really high. I think it's just a wait and see. If I don't mind, you said you wanted to be a week early on Rory. I don't mind being a week late on Rory right now.
What do you think Rory's ownership ends up finishing at this week in a giant tournament? Like 4%?
I think a little bit higher, but definitely single digits, maybe in that 6 to 8% range. And when I say I'm not in on Rory, I mean, last week I had 29% Rory in my MME. Him and Paul Casey were my two highest owned players. Would have had just a massive week if Rory even just made the cut, given that Stenson and Spieth didn't make it. So when I say I'm not in on Rory, it means I'm not doing that again. I'm not intentionally going to be overweight. He's going to be so low owned that I don't mind just matching the field, but I'm not going out of my way to make an overweight stance. If I am overweight, it's not going to be a dramatic stance by any means. I can't see myself owning more than 10% of Rory.
You see, that's the way that I was thinking about it too. Dedicate 2 lineups with Rory at a 20 and just move on my way. If Rory ends up peaking, and I have 2 lineups that are looking real good, especially with everyone having Tiger and no one having Rory.
Yeah, and if you do that too, because I mean, there's always uncertainty in the ownership projections. If he comes in at 3% and you've got, 10% Rory lineups, whether it's in 20 lineups or 100, I mean, you're pretty happy then, right? If he comes in that low, like at that point, it's worth the chance. And then if he comes in a little bit higher than you thought, you're going to be happy that you didn't go way overweight because you're not having the leverage you thought. So I think that's a safe way to still get some exposure to, like, what if he turns it on and he's going to be super low owned, but not go so far that it's really going to make or break your entire week, most likely.
So the way that I would look at it, he's played 3 events this year, starting with Pebble Beach. He was 14.2% owned in large-scale GPPs that week, 9.6 at the Genesis, 8.2 last week. And with Tiger going to garner so much ownership in that range right by him, I could actually see him being sub 5%.
Yeah, I think so. And the interesting thing here, it's long-term form versus short-term form. I mentioned the strokes gained on Jason Day the last 2 years. He's number 1 relative to the field. We've got Rory number 2, which is really high. But you look at even the last year, the last 6 months, the last 2 months, and he's a little bit better than average, but he's not sniffing the top 10 there. So it's that push and pull. And when you see the short-term form that bad over, 6 months going out to a year, at some point you've got to start to weigh that accordingly.
The one positive with Rory right now, if you look at his tee to green, he was awful at Honda, where he couldn't hit his driver, which is the best club in his bag. He was minus 4.2 strokes gained tee to green that week. But in the other 2 events, even last week, 2.3, not exceptional, but better than the field average. And he was 5 at the Genesis, so he's lingering around. Now, some weeks the putting's not there, the other weeks the chipping's not there, and he just can't get his entire game on the same page. And look, I'll be willing to burn 2 rosters on Rory every week. As long as he wins the U.S. Open, I'll be a very happy man. But I think 2 of 20 lineups make sense. Any Justin Rose for you?
Rose is the guy. I don't have a strong opinion on Rose. I just think he's very pricey for this field. I think Day is clearly a better play than Rose up top. I don't think the ownership percentages are going to be drastically different. That I see a big leverage opportunity with Rose over Day, who I'm already planning on being leveraged on Day. And then this 9K range I just love. And you make your Day lineups, you make a couple Rory lineups, and you don't want to take too much away from, in my opinion, the best way to build in these hybrid balanced lineups when you got guys like Haddon, Stenson, Fleetwood, Hideki, Noren in this 9K range. Like, so many guys that can win. You can roster 3 of them on a team. So Rose, I might grab 10% just because I generally in MME, just so people know, I'm playing 150 teams, not 20 teams. So my approach has to be a little bit different than your approach. And if somebody is top 10 in win probability odds, I probably at least have a little bit, because if I'm doing very well elsewhere, I want to make sure that I have a certain amount of total win equity across all my lineups. I want to have a certain amount of my lineups that are really likely to at least get the winner somewhere.
And for me, when I address my core players in terms of really whittling it down, I have to make a few harder choices because I generally only play 20 lineups per week. So I can't take a sprinkle on every single other guy. Like last week, somehow I churned out a little mini profit, but I had 0 Spieth and 0 Stenson and somehow didn't win all the money. And I had a bunch of Casey too. It was really weird. I had no Reed, no Tiger. Snedeker fucked off, and that was terrible news.
Oh my God, Snedeker. I had some 6-6 teams that were like Casey Reed, Sergio, or Casey Reed, Rose, and had Snedeker. And for a while there, I was thinking, oh my God, I could get 1 through 4 here with a 6-6, even if my other guys are bums. But yes, that Sned's final round was something else, man. It had to be the worst round of the day. But if I am taking stances up top, though, like I said, Tiger Woods, I'll have 0. So that buys me some lineups that I can have exposure to a lot of these guys where I might match the field on Rose. I might go slightly overweight on Rory McIlroy. I might go overweight on Day, but then really comes down to these 9K guys.
Well, before we get to the 9K guys, I love Ricky Fowler here. Ricky has lost 9 strokes total on the greens over his past 2 events. The ball striking, still there. We know historically, if you look back over time, a very good putter, especially on Bermuda. He's had success at this course in the past, and I feel like everyone is just going right by him, although his odds have moved up from 22 to 18, so the betting market does like Ricky Fowler just a little bit. I happen to like him here too, and being right next to Tiger, it's going to squash a lot of his ownership unless people play like a Ricky Tiger lineup, which I don't think that they're going to do. So so for me, I'm going to have the most Ricky of anyone in the 10K range, only because Day is so expensive, but I'll try to come close as possible with Day, and those are the 2 guys that I'm really playing besides like 2 Rory lineups.
Yeah, for me, it comes down to, I think Day of the 10K plus guys is by far the guy that I'm prioritizing. Then, all 4 guys in the 9K range would be next. And then I think I'll, dabble in Rose, Rory, Fowler, like I said, just because I want the win equity, but these aren't guys I'm actively trying to be overweight on. Rory, just because he's going to be solo owned, most likely I'll end up a little overweight, and I'll probably end up, on the field or a little underweight on Rose and Fowler. But if the field's owning 40% of Tiger, again, like that's going to deflate the ownership of all these guys. It just has to. And that allows you to, if you're making 0 Tiger lineups, that allows you to do what I'm doing, which is, it's like, I'm sure someone listening might be like, how can you have exposure to all these guys and be, either overweight or in line with the field? Well, 0% Tiger is going to open up a lot of options for you this week.
So of the 9K guys, if I was whittling it down a little bit more by like rankings, for me, I like Hideki the best. I am worried about the wrist. Obviously, we haven't seen him play since Phoenix, and that is somewhat concerning, but I think about what do I want from guys at this course. Preferably, I'd like a much better putter than Hideki, but let's throw that aside for a second. Ball striking, he gains off the tee, he gains with approaches, he has the distance to get to these par 5s, and he is an exceptionally good player on longer par 3s, and all 4 of the par 3s are over 200 yards this week. So he's going to have a chance to go for the green in 2 almost every time. The par 3 shouldn't be a problem, and if they are a problem where he's not wildly inaccurate with his driver, that he has a good enough short game that he can recoup a lot of the problems that if he does miss the par 3s, I don't expect him to make double bogey. Like, you're going to have to trade birdies for bogeys here sometimes, and when we think about birdie or better percentage, Hideki's always near the top.
Yeah, I'm really on Hideki. He actually, in our model, which of course isn't accounting for the injury just because it's all data centric, but we actually have him with the second best to win odds in this tournament. And there's actually a little bit of separation between him and the rest of the field. So I think I'll have a lot of Hideki. I like Haddon and Noren quite a bit as well. I know strokes gained approach. If you look at the data golf, they do a course history thing where they look at the percentage of, where strokes are being gained. And there are some issues with isolating a single strokes gain metric because it might not necessarily be telling you the whole story, or the way that you're using it might be wrong. Like if strokes gained approach is really important, for example, Dustin Johnson might not rate as well in strokes gained approach because he gains so much off the tee, and then his ability to gain more off, on approach isn't as high. So it's not necessarily reflective of his skill there. So I want to get that out of the way, but we have seen strokes gained approach matter more than relative to an average course. And Noren's rated really well in there. He's 8th in strokes gained approach. He's 5 straight events he's gained in strokes gained approach, 4 by a pretty hefty margin relative to the field. And Haddon, if you look at the strokes gained total just over the last 6 months, now this is again just adjusted for field strength and everything, he's third best over the last 6 months, behind only Day and Rose. So I think both these guys in the low 9Ks, you can do a lot of things with them in your lineup, and I think you really have the high end upside with them.
Yeah, I'm big on Noren here as well. Hatton, you sold me on him a little bit. I can get on board with it, but Noren, I just feel like he's going to be a fixture. He might be my most owned player from up in this range because of the price point too. Like, I don't see a huge. I really like Ricky. I really like Hideki. I really like Day. But in terms of price point, I can do so much more with Noren. I won't be like 100% Noren because I never go 100% anyone. But I might be around 50%, and I can make some Hideki, Noren, even Fowler, Hideki, Noren lineups if I feel comfortable enough with some of the guys at the low $7,000 range. And there are guys down there that are pretty damn good and severely underpriced this week, and you get the extra leverage of knowing over 60% of the players make the cut. So that's really good. I prefer him to Hatton. Do you have any love for Fleetwood, though? Because somehow he has become the forgotten man after like 2 weeks of everyone just blowing Tommy Fleetwood.
I'm kind of excited for that because I've forced myself to be underweight Tommy Fleetwood, and it hasn't been a particularly pleasant experience. It's been rather excruciating at times being very underweight on Fleetwood just because the ownership percentages and whatnot. But when you've got a strong field and you've got Tiger carrying 40% of the ownership or 30 to 40%, whatever it has you, there's going to be a lot of spread out ownerships, and I think you can focus more just on the guys that you like once you get past deciding what you're doing with Tiger. And I like Fleetwood. He's going to be in my mix of players. It's interesting. Fleetwood, Haddon, Noren, for whatever reason, it seems like these Euro players, their recent form relative to their long-term form has been great. So our model has been a little bit slow on them because they've just played so much better recently than relative to their long-term form. And I think Fleetwood, Noren, Haddon are all top 10, almost top 5 in strokes gained relative to the field over the last 6 months. So I'm in on Fleetwood. I really like building really with, Stenson you can throw in there as well.
So
I think I have Stenson.
Do you think that this is a Henrik Stenson rebound week? Because of all these guys, he's going to be the lowest owned based on how he burned everyone last week. And even when people go back and look at course history from 1 year ago, hey, he missed the cuts. But, he was coming back from Mexico. He was saying he was having stomach problems. The kid was on the way. But if you look before that, he kind of lit up this course, and he's exactly the prototypical player that you want. He hits a ton of fairways. He's a great long iron player. The one downfall to his game at this course over the years has been he can't be as aggressive on the par 5s as some of the longer hitters because he hit 3-wood off every tee.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, I think he's probably going to be owned appropriately relative to the other guys. So I do have him, even with ownership accounted for. I've got him behind, the 3 Euro guys and Haddon, Noren, Fleetwood. I've got him behind Hideki. I think he's the 5th, but again, I'm going to build so much in this range that it doesn't matter. And I'd rather play Stenson than like a Patrick Reed, who's not in this 9K range, but he's pretty close. I think there will be some recency bias from last week. People seem to like to play Patty Reed as well. So I really think there's a drop off after this 9K range that, we can talk about Adam Scott in a little bit here too. He's really interesting, but you look at Bubba, Reed, guys I think will carry similar ownership. I know they're a little bit cheaper, but I'd rather play Stenson and any of the 9K guys and then just have to dip down a little bit lower in the 7Ks if necessary.
So for me, when I have to make some of the hard choices of who to play and who not to play, it's going to be Hideki and Noren for me, and I'll see if any of the other guys do fit in, but those are the two that I'm really focusing on in the $9,000 level. We talked about the $8,000 guys. You mentioned Patrick Reed comes in $8,900, and he's followed by Scott. Bubba Watson is there, Brian Harmon, Mark Leishman, the defending champion, Brandt Snedeker, coming off a disastrous final round, which cost a lot of us a lot of money. Then you got Louis, Luke List is there, Kokrak is there, Jamie Lovemark as well. I don't know what to do with Bubba Watson because in my mind, he should play really well here. As long as he doesn't hit in the water, he's going to be good. But I don't know if I can pull the trigger. I don't want Reed. Adam Scott is severely undercursed despite rating number 1 in my custom model on Fantasy National. He actually doesn't drop out of like I did it over the past 8 rounds, 12 rounds, 24 rounds, 36 rounds, all the way back through every round since 2012, and he doesn't fall outside the top 5 in the rankings in any single one of those models. So, you know, the stats are telling me Adam Scott. The universe is telling me not Adam Scott. So I might have a little exposure just so I don't feel left out, but in full disclosure, I bet Adam Scott when the odds first came out, and when Cuss said he was making him his one and done, I cashed out my money and just put that back in my
I mean, you don't
account.
want to mess with the Ander curse. It's a pretty real thing. Although, I mean, I don't know how you're dealing with the Phil win. I mean, how do we put that with the Ander curse?
Well, I mean, if you follow Tim's Twitter timeline from that day, every single person had won that tournament except for Phil. So he was either harnessing the power of the curse or the curse just worked for itself. Either way.
Yeah. But in regards to Adam Scott, I do think he's going to end up chalkier than he should be because he's played really well. He's been at a price tag people have been using him. And I think you always get that bias where when people are using a player and that player does well, they want to keep using that player. And he hasn't really seen that much of a price bump. He's 8,700. A lot of that, of course, is field related with this being such a strong field. He has gained strokes on approach and off the tee, and in both those categories in 3 consecutive tournaments, which is actually, or maybe it's 3 or 4 consecutive tournaments. But that's really nice to see for someone who, it started off he's just a terrible putter, and then he seemed like he just fell apart altogether there for a little while. And it's nice to see him bounce back. I do think he's coming back and rounding and getting closer towards his long-term form. But if you're going to give him at twice the ownership of a Stenson, for example, I'd rather, double the field on Stenson and go half the field on Scott. So I will be underweight on Adam Scott, even though I do think there's a lot of encouraging signs with this game.
Yeah, you want to get some Adam Scott exposure, you can go bet him right now to win the Masters at 55-1. That's what I did instead, just to give myself some peace of mind. I prefer Bubba in this range. I think that, he's an excellent DraftKings scorer when it all boils down to it. And you just look at him tee to green over his, just, it's funny we were saying like how poorly he was playing and everything like that. He's gained strokes tee to green in each of his past 4 tournaments. He's averaging over 7 strokes tee to green. And he's losing a ton around the greens. And he's putting well right now. And maybe a lot of that was POA influence, although he did putt well in Mexico. He has 2 top 10s, including a win in his past 2 starts. He does have a pretty decent track record here as well. Made the cut last year when he was playing god-awful. The water always scares me in terms of Bubba. If the wind picks up and he starts trying to shape stuff too much, he's going to be in the middle of the drink. But I don't think that people are going to own him as much as, let's say, Adam Scott or Patrick Reed. And I think that might kill his ownership a little. So I'll be in on Bubba.
I think he'll be a little bit less, but I'm going back to Mark Leishman, who's killed me a couple of times recently. I just think when you look at the overall odds of him coming into the T20, our T20 odds on Leishman for right now, for example, are about 31%. So we've got that higher than Bubba's, which are about 25%. So I think Bubba's real odds might be a little bit higher just because some of that data from last year might not be 100% accurate. But even if you make these two even, you're saving a couple $100 with Leishman. And I would be surprised if Leishman wasn't lower owned than Bubba, just given how these guys have played recently. And recency bias in golf is not as strong as it used to be. I think we've got a lot sharper players out there making better decisions, but it hasn't completely gone by the wayside. So I think you end up with Leishman, maybe not half the ownership of Bubba, but I think a few points lower. And every ownership point matters. That's something that I'm starting to come around to too. I used to be like, well, what's the difference if a guy is 12% owned or 7% owned? But I know Colin Drew, who does our ownership projections at dailyroto.com, he studied, I think it was winner take all tournaments, which, most of us aren't playing in that format, but I think you can apply it to just a general top heavy GPP. And he found if players are even, remotely close, like if player A has a better projection and player B is even remotely close and player B is coming in at lower ownership, it's that lower ownership play is almost always the better play. It's just a matter of, can you withstand the variance over X amount of tournaments for that to pay off?
My problem with Leishman right now is his stats look very eerily similar to what Ricky Fowler's been up to, where they've just been bleeding strokes on the greens over their past two events. Leishman minus 5.7 strokes gained putting at the Genesis, then he lost another 3.4 in Mexico. Now, we know that he goes through fits of being really good on the greens and really bad on the greens, and that's something when you look back at his career, he has extended periods of hot putting and poor putting, but it's the rest of his game. Like, he's not hitting the driver well. He's not hitting his irons well. At least with Ricky, he's still ball striking at an elite level. Leishman's just not doing that, so I'm out on Leishman.
Yeah, and that's one of the difficult things is, how much emphasis do we put on the recent data? And I think when we see a guy who's not ball striking well, or a guy who's striking the ball particularly well, we're more prone to ignore the longer term data. But that's why I kind of like having the model that Data Golf spits out. It helps to ground you somewhat. And if other people, if everyone is trying to pick up these small edges based on course history or the really recent form, well, your edge might actually be just finding a guy who's a more talented golfer that's going to get overlooked because people are dissecting all these small things. So that's what makes DFS golf though really fun, is kind of trying to weigh and decide what matters most in a sport that's very, very tough to predict.
Do you want to hear the saddest prediction from me this week?
I do. Are you playing Snedeker again?
Luke List is my favorite player in the $8,000 range.
Luke List in the he's playing really well.
Tee to green, he is absolutely lights out. And I know historically that good putters win this event, and he is not a good putter. A large sample of anything. You can look at a mini sample, a medium sample, a large sample. He sucks on the greens. However, like I mentioned, he's fourth tee to green right now over his past 24 rounds. He just keeps popping up. He makes every single cut, and maybe things like the Valspar in the Honda where it took driver out of his hand, maybe that worked to his benefit. And that's what a lot of people are saying about Tiger too. You put the driver back in, and maybe he's not as good. Maybe that will be the case with Luke List, and I'm going to look like a moron, but you're not going to need a lot of him to be massively overweight on the field. And his around the green game has just been so good. Like when we talk about tee to green, it's not just the driving, it's not just the approaches. That if he's missing these approaches, his short game has just been tremendous, and that's not something I ever thought I would see from Luke List. So, and even when you look at the betting market, he's 55 to 1 to win. He should not be 50. I mean, he should be because he's been playing so well. But like when you think about how stacked this field is, and you see some of the names down at like 100 to 1 and 150 to 1, you'd think Luke List would be down there, but he's not. Like the books know something about Luke List, and I'm in on him. He's a very good price.
It's interesting that he's gone from like this volatile guy that you can't play because you never know if he's going to make a cut to someone who's consistently making cuts. But as you mentioned, it does seem like he's putting his game completely together. And you like to see that, especially out of a long hitter, out of Luke List. The only part I disagree with you with, I don't know if he's going to come in that much lower owned than the rest of this tier. And at
more people will own Jason Kokrak than they will own Luke List.
I think more people will own Luke List.
I see. I disagree. I don't think that's going to be
pretty close.
I think people will look at course history and be like, whoa, Kokrak not only has recent form, but he does really well at this course too. And he's Jason Kokrak, and he looks like a big fat slob. I love that guy. Let's take him.
I'll say this. Of the two guys in this low 8K range who...
You like Lovemark the best?
What's that?
Is it that you like Lovemark the best?
No, I was going to say, of the... Lovemark was the guy I was referring to, but of these two guys, I will say that List, I think, is clearly the better play between him and Lovemark.
But
I'm not as on Luke List as you are. And I think a lot of that just comes, I think he's going to be in that 10 to 15% ownership range that a lot of these guys are, in which case I'll take guys that I feel more confident in their skill levels, regardless of how well he's been playing.
See, I could be way off base on this. I just feel like Louis is going to suck up so much of that ownership.
Our initial projections have Louis as lower owned than both List and Lovemark, but this is very raw. It's hard on a Tuesday morning to really get the gauge of the community until we get, until people watch your show and get the Mayo bump factored in there. So we'll see. You're probably bumping Luke List ownership up even higher as we speak, though. I
don't know how that ends up being a thing. I make bad predictions every single week. People are like, oh, Mayo's onto something with this one. No, I'm not. I'm going to play Luke List. He's going to come dead last, and that's just how it's going to end up rolling out. That's what happens to me. Although, having him at the Honda this year, I mean, had he have won, I would have won way more, but like just having him being in second place and having a pretty good core at the top, even with Justin Thomas and some of those other guys, Webb Simpson, another, that he's already won me money this year, so I'm good with Luke List.
Will you play any Snedeker?
No, not here.
I think I'm tempted to play like 8% of him. I think it'll be overweight.
I mean, you can look at the stats, but just watching him last week, and maybe he was rattled playing with Tiger. And I know he did play well on the Saturday, but like tee to green, he was bad all week. And he was skating.
He definitely was having a lucky week up until Sunday.
He was skating by making every 9-foot putt, and he was nailing them in the center of the cup. We know Snedeker is one of the best putters on tour, but we saw what happened when the rest of your game hasn't quite caught up to where your putter's at, that the putter can flip on you. And we saw it on Sunday. They just missed every 5-foot putt. Like, if that happens here, he's going to miss the cut.
Yeah.
So I'm out on Brandt Snedeker. Brian Harman's more interesting to me than Brandt Snedeker is.
Yeah, I just think the ownership might end up like drastically different between those guys, in which case I'd play more Snedeker. I don't know. Where do you have Harman's ownership? Like, obviously it's ballpark right now, but
I would say around 12 to 15%. I would say Snedeker's like 8 to 13. I'm not going to play either of them, but I just thought that.
Yeah, I think if that's the case, then I'd rather play Harman than Snedeker. I think if you get Harman more like 15 to 18%, you get Snedeker more like 5%, then I'd rather play Snedeker.
So in the $7,900 to $7,500 range, we got Kiradech Appy Barnrat, who is returning from Southeast Asia. Not in India, he was in Brunei, so he's went from Mexico to Southeast Asia to Florida. He has 2 consecutive top 6s at this event, though, so Kiradech, fun name in our minds from WGC Mexico when he made the run on Sunday. A lot of people watched that, so I'm really conflicted about what to do with him because that travel does really worry me. But all of a sudden, you're going to watch the guy take down some giant GPP who didn't even know that, and we're just like, hey, Kiradech is pretty good. And sometimes that's just the way that it ends up working out. And he's followed down there by Cam Smith at 7,800 too. Between the two, do you have a preference? Because I like Cam Smith a little bit more than Kiradech.
I do like Cam Smith a bit more, and in our adjusted strokes gained over the last 6 months, Cam Smith in 36 rounds played, which is a decent sample relative to the guys in the field, is 4th best of these guys in the field of the last 6 months. And I don't think that the ownership disparity is going to be much between the two. I know Cam Smith was very chalky last week. He ended up doing well for people. He's probably going to be somewhat chalky this week, but I do like him better.
The one thing about Appy Barnrat is if you go back and look at what he's done, he has some wins on the card in his past 4 events. He didn't win in Mexico, but he did win the Perth Super 6 in South Africa. And then last week, do you know what he went and played last week? By the way, the tournament that he played in?
Was that the one with the ridiculously difficult course?
No, that was the Hero Indian Open. He didn't play in that. Grillo played in that. Appy Barnrat went and played on the Web.com Tour of Asia and just crushed everybody. I don't know why he played. I assume they were like, hey, here's $3 million. Why don't you come play and win? But he does have 2 wins in his last 4 starts.
That's pretty funny. Didn't something happen with Grillo in that tournament? Not to go too off topic, but he is in the field this week. I saw something that somebody got mad at him for something.
Oh, people get mad at him every single year. Grillo at this tournament last year put 2 in the drink on 6 and then threw his fucking club into the water. He was like, enough of this garbage.
I remember this because I was winning going into Saturday. I was winning like, a $4 GPP, which had like crazy amount of people. So you're very unlikely to hold the lead. But I was at the NCAA tournament here in Buffalo on Saturday. Because they had it here last year, and I was like, I was telling my friend Dan, I was like, I got this team. Like, basically, I've got 1 through 6 right now. And then that Grillo thing happened, and I'm just like, what is going on? And then I saw a clip on Twitter of him throwing his club into the drink, and that was the end of that fun 2 days that quickly evaporated.
Hey, he did birdie the next hole, so it wasn't the end of the world.
Yeah, but he did not end up placing that well, did he?
No, but he took a 9 on number 6. That's only half.
Right. If you're gonna take a 9 on a hole, you're probably not gonna place that well.
Hey, at least listen. If it was up to me, and you could make, that's 4 over par for the hole. I'd rather my guy make a 9 than 4 consecutive bogeys.
Well, for DK
Yeah,
scoring,
for DK scoring, yes. For the overall.
Well, even in real life you would, because then you've got 3 holes to make it up. Whereas if you're bogeying 4 straight holes, you haven't birdied any of them. So.
And hey, you can always put the stuff into context. Griot's 9 on number 6 last year is only half of what John Daly made in 1998.
Really?
Yeah, he made an 18.
How is that even possible? I could make an 18.
He put 5 into the water, and then he quit the tournament.
That's amazing.
So the rest of this, like, upper $7,000 range, we got Jimmy Walker, who's flashing sneaky form, by the way. He can't quite put it all together for 4 rounds, but it looks like Jimmy Walker could be coming out the back end of the Lyme disease stuff, but he's 7,800. ZJ tends to play well here. Had a double eagle here 2 years ago. 77. Benny Ann, 77. Ryan Moore, 77. Stallings, Griot, Knox, Hahn, Marty Laird, who's won this tournament before. So of those guys, I will give you one of my favorite plays of the week. He continues to rattle off top 25s, and everyone always says, hey, you got to play him when he's on the West Coast, because when he's on the East Coast, he doesn't end up winning and performing all that well. I'm not going to buy into that narrative with my main man, James Hahn! He's such a good play this week.
I do like Hahn, or I should say our finish probabilities like Hahn, and as a result, I like Hahn. But we've got him with about a 25% chance to D20. And you look at the guys with better odds from him to do that. There's only a couple guys with better price tags that have better odds. One of them, who I always tout on this show, who we'll get into later, you can probably guess. I like Hahn. I like Zach Johnson a lot too. His strokes gained approach a lot better, a lot sharper than last year. Last year, I think he was outside the top 100 in that category, 17th thus far this year. He just looks like he's playing very, very well. And I think when you combine what we know about him, like long term, and the fact that he's doing well on approach shots this year, something that's going to matter at this course, I like Zach Johnson, 7,700.
With James Hahn, even to pile on a little bit more, here are his starts and finishes so far this season. 2nd at the Sony, 36th, 45th, 11th, 26th, 14th at the Genesis. So he has yet to miss a cut, which is probably the curse of doom on him right now for this tournament. But like in my model over the past 24 rounds, he rates out number 2. Over that time, 10th in greens and regulations gained, 2nd in birdie or better percentage gained, 8th tee to green, 5th in ball striking, 13th in proximity from beyond 200 yards, 9th in par 4 scoring 450 to 500 yards, where you're going to see 5 of the par 4s fall this week. The only thing that he's not doing right now, 7th in approach in that time, by the way, as well. He's 86th in the key par 3 range, but that can, that's not a huge indicator of what's going on. Just at $7,600, it's not like he's devoid of win equity either. We've seen him win the Genesis. We've seen him win the Wells Fargo. And generally speaking, those are 2 stacked tournaments when it comes to the upper echelon. So he has no problem going out and beating the good guys.
Yeah, and over the last 2 months in our adjusted scoring averages, the only guys that rank ahead of him are Jason Day, Alex Noren, Tommy Fleetwood, Hideki Matsuyama, and Haddon. So of the non-9K plus guys, he has, by far the best adjusted scoring average over the last 2 months. Of course, small time frame, but if that lines up with some of the things that you're saying over a similar span, even when you adjust for difficulty of course, difficulty of field, we're seeing similar things over the last couple of months.
So from this range, it's Cam Smith and Hahn for me. You like ZJ. Is there anyone else that we should be mixing in? Do we finally have to give Scott Stallings some credit for playing well for like the past 2 months?
Nah, I don't. I think that's. I always like Ben On. He's up there in terms of strokes gained approach.
Yeah, but here's the thing with Ben On, and maybe he's
gonna put it in the drink.
Oh well, not even that. Like I've been targeting almost throughout the course of the show. I've been talking about how I've been targeting ball strikers over and over and over, and he's a good ball striker who's a shit putter. That's who Ben An is, except. The main difference is, and maybe you want to play him for ownership reasons, that he probably comes in low owned after burning a lot of people last week when he was a bit chalky, but you can basically get the same skill set as Ben An for $600 cheaper.
What's that tease? Who's that?
Keegan Bradley is that guy. Kevin Chappell is that guy, and they're all cheaper.
I think On is better than those guys.
He's not. No. Why do you think he's better?
I don't know. I'm obsessed with a guy who's got that distance off. I mean, he's got more distance off the tee than Keegan does.
He doesn't, but Chappell hits it farther than he does.
I think I would bet On's better in strokes gained approach, though, when you combine it. If you look at strokes gained approach, he's 11th this season in strokes gained approach. Chappell, and it's small sample size, Chappell's like 25th or so. If you look at last year, he was 32nd. Chappell was 50th. So I feel confident he's better there. Obviously, the putting's an issue, but I'm not seeing putting as mattering as much as I think you are on this course.
I mean, you might be able to look at like the top 5 and maybe putting doesn't matter. I just look at the guys that have won this tournament in the past, and you'd be hard pressed to find someone who isn't at least well known as being a good putter. Listen, Tiger is one of the best putters of a generation. He's won here 8 times. Ernie Els has won this tournament twice. Back in the day when he was one of the best guys on the green. Matt Every has won here twice, and that was all just strictly based on his putting and approaches from beyond 200 yards, which he still does well, by the way. Leishman, good putter. Day, that year he and Spieth were so much better on the greens than everyone else. It was absurd, and I do like some of the ball striker bad putter guys, but I'd rather take the cheaper ones than Ben An.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm just looking at, if you look at historically this event, you get less strokes gained from putting than relative to an average field is kind of what I'm looking at. But yeah, up top, Leishman won last year. He gained 2 strokes putting, which was some of the best in the field.
Rod Pampling won this event before. Rod Pampling, the only thing he can do is putt.
I once got into a Rod Pampling argument, which is weird for me to say, only having been in golf DFS for a few years. That's the end of that story. It doesn't get more exciting from there.
How does that even come up?
It was some argument over value and like how much you need out of a certain priced golfer. And it's not even worth explaining, but Rod Pampling was involved.
Let's drop below the $7,500 level and see if we can open up some value. We like a lot of these guys in the $9,000 area. I want to play Jason Day and Ricky Fowler on some teams. If you got Tiger, you're probably going to have to go down to this level too. So I first see the big name that pops out to me, and I know, like, if you look at him on Twitter, he says he hates this course, and his results would indicate that he does not like this course at all. But Scott Piercy is hot fire right now when we talk about strokes gained approach. He's number 1 in this field in terms of recent form. He has 4 top 25s in his past 5 starts. The only place where he missed the cut was a place where everyone really expected him to do well, was in Phoenix. The problem is he can't chip, he can't putt. Can you see that flipping around for him? Because he's still putting up quality performance despite the fact that he's losing 2 strokes a week on the greens.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned that he's leading the field in strokes gained approach. He's leading the entire PGA Tour, 22 measured rounds too. So it's not, just that you played a couple tournaments and happened to do really well in a round or two. So he's striking the ball very well in terms of approach. As far as the short game stuff, you're asking, like, can he turn that around? But like the way my brain's working is he really skill level number 1 in strokes gained approach? What happens if that regresses? So I think like that's more likely to happen than it is that he starts picking it up around the green. So that concerns me enough that I think I'm out. I do like other guys better. My guy Molinari, who I have to tout, every time I come on this show, he's always a darling of the data models because of his scoring averages, but he's got pretty good course history here as well. If you look at strokes gained at this course per round, Molinari is behind only Rory and Tiger Woods in terms of average strokes gained per round at this tournament, and that's in 20 rounds played here. So I'm not a big course history guy, but when it lines up with somebody that I generally view as underpriced when he's in the low 7s anyways, it helps confirm that he's a good play.
The problem with Piercy, and you kind of mentioned it, what if the irons do drop back? But historically throughout his career, he's been such a supreme ball striker. We've seen the irons get hot, and when they get hot, they tend to stay hot. And we've seen the rest of his game catch up a little bit. So I mean, he probably won't lead the field this week in strokes gained approach, but I wouldn't say lock him in to be top 15. But in terms of ball striking, top 20, I can definitely see that. And if you get anything out of his short game, then you're just hitting a bonanza. And even when you look at like his form over the past year and a half, you take a longer sample of it, he was hurt for most of last year. And he missed like 8 consecutive cuts because he was dealing with a bum wrist. So it's really hard to factor in what he was doing then. When you looked slightly before the injury, this was a guy who was competing in almost every single major.
Yeah, and he is someone we typically associate with upside, right? As someone that can put together a high-end performance on any given week, even when he wasn't going as well the last couple of years. I remember him as someone that you're always throwing a little bit of exposure to in tournaments. When he was even cheaper there for a while because he wasn't playing as well, but he still had that high-end upside. So I see where you're coming from. I think he's a top 30 play in this field. I just don't think he's a top 15 play.
Okay, let's get to this because this is going to be this cannot turn out well for anyone. Keegan Bradley over the past 24 rounds is first in this field in ball striking, first in this field in strokes gained tee to green. He's inside the top 5 in approaches from beyond 200 yards. We know not the greatest putter, and that might be putting it lightly. So if I'm going to use Luke List, how can I not use Keegan Bradley here?
He might be the highest owned golfer sub 8K, or
there is. I don't want to say there's 100% chance it's Kevin Chappell, but there's a 95% chance it's Kevin Chappell in this week.
Yeah, I think Chappell and Grillo are the two that we have higher than Keegan right now. But then we have Keegan right after that. So I think if you're looking for reasons not to play Keegan, it's more just that people are going to play Keegan, and is he really that much better than the other options? I mean, you've got some guys at 7,100. I'm interested. Our projections don't necessarily agree. I think Kevin Kisner is interesting at 7,100. Just in my brain when I see that name and that price tag.
I have something about Kevin Kisner though, because I was on Kisner in this spot last year and was devastated when he lost to Mark Leishman. But the big reason that I was on Kisner was a form-related thing. Like, he was making so many birdies throughout the first course of the season from beyond 200 yards. Like, his lack of distance off the tee wasn't preventing him from scoring on the longer holes. He is just not that guy right now. Maybe it flips, and we saw it with Patrick Reed last week, but that's not a bet I want to make. Like, I don't feel comfortable with Keegan, but I like Keegan. I like Chappell. And if I'm saving so much ownership up at the top, I don't feel all that bad if they're going to be super duper chalky. And like, what's super duper chalky for Keegan Bradley this week? 15%? 16%?
Yeah. I mean, it's not going to be 20+%. So it's not like you're going to get killed on the ownership. I guess it's just more like an opportunity costing, like your ability to be overweight on other guys because they're going to be, 7 to 10% is more. It's not so much that the ownership on Keegan himself is terrible. It's just the opportunity cost and what you could do with other guys you might view as similarly skilled and lower owned.
I like Kyle Stanley at $7,200. I was bummed I didn't get to use him at Valspar last week because he withdrew because he didn't want to play after a nice performance in Mexico. But he was top 5 in the field in strokes gained approach in Mexico. It's nice to see his ball striking get back up. And we know that when he runs hot, he can putt a little bit, but almost like Piercy, almost like Chappell, like Keegan Bradley. He's an excellent ball striker, and I think that he's just better than a lot of people in this range.
And one guy I'm interested in your thoughts on, because last week I gladly faded him.
Charlie Hoffman.
I'm a sucker for Charlie Hoffman. I'm going to play like 8 to 10% Hoffman no matter what, just because I'm a helpless cause in regards to Hoffman. But same price, Streelman last week was, I thought, egregious chalk, and I was very happy he missed a cut. I full faded him. Of course, I full faded Cam Smith and Adam Hadwin as well, and they both did fairly well. But Streelman is going to go from very chalky to, I don't know if barely anybody's going to own him. Are you on him at all?
He's been one of the reasons that everyone was on him last week is because he was so lights out tee to green, and that just went away last week. And it's funny, like, you look at where he's played really well this year: Phoenix, Genesis, Farmers, where he gained a lot of strokes tee to green. Those are courses where you're going to hit driver a lot of the time. And he's so accurate off the tee that just kind of vanished last week. You were dealing with very small fairways last week that if you start to veer off a little bit, can affect your entire game. So I think I will be back in on Streelman here because I was looking at him. Grayson Murray I found somewhat intriguing at this course. Charlie Hoffman, like you said, is someone that you can always kind of go to because his ball striking can just show up. He was second here last year too. Streelman is interesting. We've seen him win on Bermuda grass before, and we know that he's a lot like Piercy in a way that he can just make these runs of like 6 straight birdies. You're like, where the hell did this come from? So you don't need a lot of Streelman exposure, but I will have a tiny bit.
Yeah, and there's a few guys, I think, in this little 7K range that seemed like they were chalk a few weeks ago, and then they had some bad performances. Now they're not chalk. I think Ollie's another one who's very risky, very volatile, but you're looking for someone who, if he makes the cut, can score a ton of DK points and isn't going to come at very high ownership. Like, he can easily outscore Keegan. It just, you're going to get much lower, I think, cut made probability out of him. But I like him as well as someone that was recent chalk and is going to be very low owned this week.
When you looked at like your regression models of what stats actually matter at this course, and you said that putting was way down, how much importance is weighted on strokes gained off the tee?
So basically what Data Golf is doing, they have a historical event data tool that you can find on datagolf.ca, and it just compares. Huh?
.ca.
Yeah, .ca. So it comes down to basically how the total strokes gained are compiled for the tournament, and the percentage that's gained on putting at this event on average is like 32% compared to like 36% on the average tour. Is basically, so you're kind of exchanging some strokes gained putting for strokes gained approach, and then it looks like around the green and off the tee are pretty much in line with the average tour. And again, as I said, you got to be careful with the way you use this data because it's very easy to be misused, but just with no additional context, that's kind of what they're finding, is that you see a higher percentage of strokes gained, of total strokes gained from approach, and that's coming from the putting area.
One of the tools that you can use on Fantasy National, it's similar in a way, but you can separate it by the winner and how the winners over the past 5 years, what did they do really well? You can separate it by top 5, top 10, top 20, guys that made the cut and guys that missed the cut to see what they did poorly, to try to figure out if there's any sort of correlation. Right now, I have strokes gained approach among the top 10 finishers over the past 5 years being over doubly as important of strokes gained off the tee. And the reason that I bring this up is that Charles Schwartzel can't hit a fucking drive to save his life. But the rest, his irons are all right, and he's putting the lights out. The guy's an excellent putter. I just see his name down here, and in terms of quality of player and big wins that he's had over his career, like, he's a better player than most of these guys. And I know that he kind of tanked it on the weekend at Valspar tournament where he had won in the past, and even with Augusta coming up, a place where he ended up T3 last year. And a lot of that was just based on putting, another course where off the tee work isn't the biggest factor in the world. And it's more approach shots that I think Charles could be super sneaky here. And you're getting him at like 3%.
Yeah, and he's an interesting guy for our model because we have two models. We have a fantasy model and we have the finish probabilities model, and they work somewhat in different ways. Usually guys are pretty close in both models, but Charles is the one guy that it's pretty divergent in both models. The one that's based, solely off adjusted scoring averages, the finish probability model, he doesn't rate as well in, and more of our fantasy model geared towards DK scoring, he rates really well in it from a value perspective. So I think there's probably some volatility for him to make the cut, but if he does make it, we like him a lot from a DK scoring standpoint at that price tag. You need someone that initial ownership projections, again, have him as, not that high owned, like a 5% type of guy. And that's where I start seeing, Keegan at 15%, Charles at like 4 to 5%. That's where I start seeing that opportunity cost. But going back to that like course history type thing and how shots gained approach matters. If you look at the top 25 guys in course history here, with at least 10 rounds or so, you've got some guys who are pretty good in approach, not including the guys that are just really good golfers, but you got Kevin Na in there. You've got Jim Furyk in there. You've got Molinari in there. You've got Keegan in there. So I think that definitely if you're looking for a course fit thing, that's probably it. I just, always caution not to overdo it. But one guy who's in that top 25 near the bottom, who was lights out in strokes gained approach last week.
JB Holmes.
Yes.
He led the field in strokes gained approach last week.
Yes, he did, which was very surprising. But
I will take over 3.5 balls in the water this week for JB Holmes.
But he's
imagine this for a second. Imagine Ryan Palmer was in the field this week.
Dude, I'm telling you, I think that's my one concern with Ben On. I just have I played him early on. I feel like, before it was cool to play Ben On. I'm a Ben On hipster, but I remember him a couple tournaments in a row having, going along really smoothly and then water done. But I like Holmes though. Anyone that's can put up the DK points that he can put up if he plays the 4 rounds is someone you should be overweight in tournaments if he's going to be sub 5%. And I think he will. So you can just take stabs on these guys at like 7% of your lineups. If you're playing more lineups, again, if you're playing the 20, you've got to be a bit more choosy in who you're using from this range.
Yeah, so I won't be using Holmes because I'm a sucker for a nice hot name that, a nice sleeper that could pop up. But Sam Horsfield is $7,000. He's 275 to 1 as well in the betting market. I'll probably end up betting him top 20 or maybe potentially top 10, just double up on those 2 bets. But he has 2 top 5s in his past, or 2 top 6s. No, 2 top 5s. A second and a fourth in 2 of his past 4 starts. He missed the cut in the other 2, and obviously those were on the European tour. He's a 21-year-old Brit. He grew up in Orlando, though, played golf at the University of Florida, so these courses and the Bermuda grass is not going to be uncommon for him. He's one of the world's best young players, and people are going to want Sam Burns or Curtis Luck. I think that a guy that's actually had the pro experience being through it, playing on a grind on the European tour. It's not like we haven't seen Europeans play really well here. I like Horsfield there at $7,000.
I'm not going to lie to you, Mayo. I did not know who that was until you mentioned him.
Yeah, this is why you got to read my column up on DKPlaybook.com.
I know.
This happens every year because of the invitational status. They always, who were the other guys in it? You got Colin Morikawa. He is at Cal, I believe. He's one of the top amateurs in the world. We also have Doc Redman, who's the reigning U.S. amateur champion. He's $6,800. He's playing at Clemson right now. Curtis Luck was the 2016 amateur champion, the Aussie with the man bun. Everyone remembers him from the U.S. Open a few years ago when he was the low amateur. He's a pro now, playing on the web.com tour, but he's a high pedigree player. Horsfield has just been playing on the European tour and playing really well. Variant, but high finishes mixed with missed cuts, but I'll take that from a $7,000 guy. I'm not going to use him in fucking cash games.
No, of course. And I do think this low 7Ks range, I mean, we hit on a few of these guys, like Austin Cook's another one who can put up some good DK scoring. All these guys initially look like they're not going to swallow up a whole ton of ownership because you're going to see more ownership in Molinari, even though I like him. I think he's going to be somewhat chalky. Chappell, Keegan, some of these $7,300 guys could soak up a lot of the ownership down here, where if you're willing to be risk tolerant and you're willing to fade one of those guys or just be underweight on a couple of the chalkier guys, you can get exposure to a handful of guys then that have upside and be overweight on all of them a little bit. But some people I know like to play tighter cores than that. But I think that's like an interesting strategy for this week, is to just be underweight on the low 7Ks chalk and then be overweight slightly on a handful of guys and not just pick one particular guy down here. Kevin Na looks pretty well. Obviously, he had to withdraw. I think he had a neck injury.
Yeah, so that's not great news in terms of Kevin Na, but he got himself into the match play because of it, and he's going to gear up and try to get into the Masters, where he has a lot of sustained success at the Masters, quite honestly. And he's remember when the first Millionaire Makers, he would be like $6,000 at the Masters.
They've definitely changed the pricing. We don't get these sub 7K guys nearly as much as we used to. I mean, even like in this field, I know you can take the chances more, as you said, because a higher percentage of guys are going to make the cut, but there's not a whole lot, in the sub 7K range that.
All right, I do have a few names. Aaron Wise, any interest at $6,900?
I know we've been betting him as a long shot T20 guy recently, but I don't think so. I like Harkins here.
Brandon Harkins at the same price, and the other guy at the same price. Who do you have your ownership projections out right now?
I do. Again, it's early. It's pretty raw.
What is Sam Saunders rating out at? Double digits?
Not double digits, but if sometimes the better way to view the ownerships this early is just relative to similarly priced players, and we do have him as the chalkiest of this group at sub 7K.
I mean, he's Ernie's grandson. How could he not win? And he's playing pretty well, despite the fact that he can't hit an iron over the past month.
Yeah, we've got him and like Siwoo Kim, your boy Siwoo.
Yeah, only ever bet Siwoo, by the way. Don't get into the DraftKings game with Siwoo.
And then like Swafford is kind of like the guys people might use. But yeah, Harkins is pretty interesting there. And this comes to the game theory thing too. Like we've got Harkins with I think it's like a 15% chance to T20 here, which obviously isn't that high, but you're projecting him at like 2% owned or something. Like, would you rather have Harkins at a 15% chance to T20 and 2% ownership, or would you rather have, I don't know, someone like a Keegan Bradley who's got more like 20 to 25% chance, but it's going to be like 15% owned? And I think that's really like where the game theory conversations get interesting. Like how much T20 equity would you sacrifice in order to pick up someone who's that much lower owned in the field?
I mean, I'd probably take the guy who's won a major.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair because I mean you also do have to take into account.
Yeah, you have to think top 5 equity, top win equity too with some of these guys, and Keegan is one who does. I don't have the number in front of me, but I would guess that he has way higher top 5 equity than Brandon Harkins does, comparative to top 20 value.
Yeah, I mean when you're talking top 20, it's like 24% to 15%, and then when you look at, let's just say win equity, Keegan's more than double his win equity. So the disparity definitely grows as you start filtering that into more top heavy. So yeah, that is a relevant part of the conversation too.
The last 2 guys that I wanted to bring up, one, we always talk about like bounce back weeks, like, recency bias and all this stuff. What about like a reverse Anderkirk bounce back week for Bryson? Bryson rates out really well for me in what I'm looking at this week.
Yeah, I'm not on Bryson. I do think he's one of the few guys that carries a little bit of ownership. I don't think it's enough that's really going to tilt you. Like if he's 4% instead of 2%, I don't think that's going to drive any decision making. I have him behind a lot of this. JB Holmes at 7K. I understand there's that stigma that he's a sub 7K guy, but he's basically in line with these 7K, 7,100 guys that I just think are significantly better. And when you look at the ownership, none of these guys are going to be like 1%. I don't think Bryson is either. So I'd rather just take JB Holmes at, maybe even lower ownership than Bryson.
What about Haotong? I played Haotong in Mexico. Not a success.
He has one of the largest standard deviations of any of the golfers.
Of course, one's from China, one's from Korea, but Haotong and Siwoo Kim are basically the same guy now.
Yeah, I think he might actually have our highest standard deviation in the field, which means he does have that upside too. Him and JJ Spawn have 2 of the highest standard deviations.
The problem with Spawn is since he got injured with the wrist, like he's just been bad. Like he has not shown any signs of being good.
I had a sprinkle of the one tournament where I think he started out like +8 the first day.
That was the Honda.
It didn't get much better from there.
No, it was actually the Genesis, I think. Genesis, he ended up +10 after the first round. Like he's just not. As Hank Hill would say, that boy ain't right.
Yeah, he was on withdraw watch like from the get go. You should make an all withdraw team this week though. I think you can play Kevin Na, Hideki, Hoffman,
Bryson, Spawn.
Well, Stenson historically, maybe not this year.
Hey, Jason Day's not afraid of a WD.
Yeah.
Or at least a projected WD, then it never ends up happening. Siwoo Kim loves a WD.
Who loves a WD?
Siwoo Kim. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because he either wins or withdraws, right?
Yeah, basically. All right. I think we've covered the field enough for this one. Who's your pick to win? I'm picking Hideki.
I'm going to go.
Actually, you know what? I'm going to change that. I'm going to pick Ricky.
I'm going to go with a guy that I've been underweight on, and I'm finally looking forward to being overweight on. I'm going to go Alex Noren.
All right, cool. Listen, I'll be in the betting market with you with Alex Noren. Those are my 3 big bets this week. I'm going Ricky, Hideki, and Alex Noren. Hopefully one of them pays. I still haven't bet. If people watch Monday's show, I talked about how you want to wait on both those guys because their odds are going to drop. They already have. Hideki's down to 25. Alex Noren's down to 28. They might even drop farther down that list because Tiger's generating a whole lot of buzz and pushing everyone way down the odds sheet.
I still can't wrap my head around his odds to win right now. It's just mind-boggling to me.
You know what's going to be awesome? That we spent like an hour and 10 minutes talking about this tournament, and Tiger's going to win, and people are just going to remember being like, oh yeah, these idiots didn't have Tiger. Morons.
These people said not to put Tiger on a single lineup.
Hey, you're either all in or you're all out. Were you trying to win or are you trying to like min cash? It's what we're up to, isn't it?
I look at these odds and I see Tiger, like, what are the chances that he's really twice as likely to win this tournament than Jason Day?
He's not.
There's no way that that's accurate. And that's what I'm looking at sportsbook.ag right now. Tiger plus 500, Day plus 1,000.
And on Bet365 right now, it's 5-1 for Tiger. It's 12-1 for Day now.
That's wild. Hideki plus 2,300. It's like, he's not 4.5 times to 5 times more likely than Hideki to win the tournament. There's just, I refuse to believe it. Even if he wins, I'll refuse to believe it.
All right. Mike Leone, pimp the Daily Roto golf package.
Yeah, head over to dailyroto.com/premium. Click golf. We've got weekly, monthly, seasonal packages. It's powered by the guys at Data Golf, which you've heard me reference throughout this show.
Datagolf.ca.
Datagolf.ca. Some fellow Canadians that are very sharp dudes. And I really like our product. We have a fantasy model that's customizable. So if you want to weight course history more, if you want to weight it less, recent form more or less, you can do that. The projections will automatically update, but the default projections are really good. We also have a finished probability model that works a little bit differently. So it's kind of fun to have 2 different looks at 2 different models and see where they either converge or diverge. And the fantasy model comes with an optimizer attached. You can do things like max the amount of ownership you want in a lineup. If you want to make sure the lineup's contrarian enough for a tournament, you can do that. You can make riskier or not as risky lineups. So it's a really cool product overall. I'm really excited about it. Looking forward to using it this week, and Masters coming up, of course.
That's true. I should probably spoil it for people right now if they've tuned in long enough for this, that Mike Leone will be joining me on the Masters Millionaire Maker show, and I will announce the other guest that is along with us in the future, probably when he's on next week, if I can get him on. No, there is nothing next week because it's match weight. Probably not for Valero because I want to use him at the Masters. I'll figure it out. It's a surprise. Tune in and be surprised. All right? Anyway, that'll do it for me. You can follow me at ThePME on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where I have my betting cheat sheet. My DraftKings cheat sheet will be up on DKPlaybook.com, as is my breakdown of the field and the course and the key stats, which is already up right now. Monday show with Feinberg, always a lot of fun in the live chat. Wednesday afternoon, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on the DraftKings YouTube and Facebook page if you want to get in the draw for a free Millionaire Maker Masters ticket. Leave your DK name, a review of the show, the audio review of the show, preferably 5 stars, and then tweet it to me with a screenshot with the hashtag APIDK. Got it? And Fantasy National, of course. We talked about all the tools you can get there, and if you sign up for the month right now, it brings you through the Masters, the biggest stat base and most customizable one you could ever want to have. Lineup generator, ownership projections, event simulators, head-to-head history, past course conditions, and a whole lot more. Go become a member at Fantasy National right now. All right? I'm Pat Mayo. Good luck with the API. I'll see you next time.